Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another great episode of Market Impact Insights. Today's topic is something that is so foundational, so critical for marketing to have lasting impact in any organization. And that is really leveraging data to make better decisions. And in the context of an overall digital marketing strategy, what are the intentional steps we need to do as leaders to create the kind of culture that embraces data in the midst of massive change, in the midst of constantly evolving technology with AI changing the way we strategize and execute? How do we get underneath that? And then what are the leadership behaviors and what are the new skill sets that are emerging that really make a difference inside organizations? We're going to get into all of that with Brook Shepard, who is the founder of Mason Interactive. That's a premier digital marketing organization that really takes data, design, and strategy, brings them together, and it's all about driving exceptional results for clients. And Brook has this really long track record of delivering measurable results. He's established himself as a trusted partner for businesses that are thinking big. They're looking to scale. And under his leadership, Mason Interactive has grown into a truly full-service agency that really prioritizes collaboration with clients in a wide range of industries, from e-commerce to healthcare. So he's seen it all, including leveraging cutting-edge technology and those data-driven insights into meaningful, impactful campaigns. So, Brook, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Happy to be here.
So you've had this really interesting journey of creating impact, but let's go back. And what originally sparked your passion to pursue a career in and around marketing?
The truth is, it's my aunt, who was a vice president of marketing at Sony Records in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we'd visit her. We'd drive down from Westchester outside the city, and we'd drive down to see her in Midtown. And, you know, this is the late 80s and early 90s, and I was in high school. And she had, to date myself, she had posters on her wall of Miles Davis and Brittany Fox and Warrant and all these cool hair metal bands. And I would sit in her office and think, this is work. You can get paid to think creatively about how to push products you like out into the world. And I thought that was just the coolest job. And she was the first signpost for me on that journey.
Wow. And isn't that interesting? You know, so often there is someone in either our social circle, but in this case, it's family. And it's almost like an ignition switch. It just kind of turns you on to really think about all the amazing possibilities.
Yeah, and the other part of it is, for me specifically, is that my father is still, to this day, practicing as an attorney. God bless him. And I went to school and studied painting in a holistic way, which we're going to talk about how I think that informs things. But I have those two parts of my upbringing. You know, there's the financially responsible lawyer, and there's the creative part, studying painting at school. And I think that advertising is a great mixture of those things. I think it's a good career, and we'll see what happens with AI, but it's a good career if you're interested in creativity, but you don't want to be a starving artist, and you're interested in making a living, but making the most money is not your number one goal. It's a great place to sit between those two disciplines and find a path for yourself. At least that's how I always thought about it.
Yeah. And when you reflect back on your journey, what's been some of the biggest learning you've taken from that? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
I am constantly surprised all the time at my own ability or inability to move things forward. And I mean that both ways. The way staff changes and the way that generations change over time. I'm 50. Most of the people here are in their 20s. So I'm constantly learning. When I reflect back some of the biggest moments and surprises, I think you learn early on there's two things. The first is I learned before I started this agency I had to learn and self-reflect on how my career had gone to that point. And it had gone okay. And I had cool jobs as a stockbroker and marketing at CBS MarketWatch. But I didn't do super well at any of those jobs. And the first thing I had to do was reflect that despite the challenges of those companies, the common element was me. I was the common denominator in those jobs not working out. And I had to self-reflect and learn about that and say, maybe I'm the problem, right? And be self-aware about that. That was a big learning for me. And the surprises as it comes along is just the continued reinvention of the space and the way, and now we're at the forefront of AI here, at the way that technology has changed over time and the way that we're constantly having to evolve in the face of technological changes, which is, AI is a step forward, but email was a big step forward too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned something really big there, which was that honest self-reflection and looking back at those jobs. And that's a really tough thing to do, to get that honest with ourselves. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. And so I think a lot of people kind of shy away from it. But when you go and you're just really honest to how difficult was that for you to get to that level, to really assess, hey, what was my accountability or role in how things turned out?
It was by the end, it was pretty easy of doing that because before I started Mason, I found the job that worked really well for me. And before that, I had a small SEO and design practice working out of my spare bedroom in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And I did that for 2 or 3 years. We're going back 25, 30 years here. And I learned a lot doing that. But so I had to self-reflect on those earlier jobs not working out for a variety of reasons. And then I went to work for myself, and I had to have another layer of self-reflection, which was that went okay, that company. I would make, again, 30 years ago, I would make $5,000 one month and I was flush. And then the next month I'd make $300. And I'd have a hard time paying my rent. And I'd go up and down and seesaw. And I had to realize that I was doing okay, but I lacked the skills to grow past that point. I didn't have them. It was self-evident in the data. So I went to get a job. So I was doing SEO and I had a sales background and I was doing design work for clients. And I had to find the job that fit me. And a big agency like Gray would not have been a good fit for me. At that point, I was 29 years old, and I was not a guy that had had a lot of corporate jobs in a couple of years. And I didn't have the skill set to fit into those places. So I had to find a job that would teach me something new while acknowledging my own problems. And what I ended up with was a very creative, entrepreneurial environment at a very small agency that grew very quickly in Long Island. I reverse commuted. Most people live in the suburbs and commute into the city. I did the reverse. And I found a really good fit for me at this agency called Send Traffic, which was in Rockville Center, Long Island. And it was a great fit for me. Right? It would not have been a good fit for someone more corporate. It would not have been a good fit for a younger me. But at that point in my career, approaching 30, it was a fantastic fit for me to work at that agency.
Yeah. And the other thing you mentioned there, which is the openness to continuous learning. You were learning and kind of admitting, hey, there are things that I'm not yet fully confident in or maybe fully competent in. And that's the other thing that I think a lot of people, they want to gravitate to just have me do the things that I think I'm fully competent in, rather than say, no, I can really grow myself by being open to this idea of learning and going through that process.
One tries. And part of that was my education, the painting education, which was about continually self-reflecting. I mean, there's a thing where a painting teacher of mine, Archie Rand, talked to me about the Sistine Chapel and Michelangelo painting the Sistine Chapel. If I'm going to get these numbers wrong because it's been 40 years, 30 years, but if he had painted something like 1 square foot a day, given the square footage of the Sistine Chapel, it should have taken him, 2 months to paint the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have these numbers right, but you get the idea. Actually, it took him 2 years. So if he could have painted 1 square foot a day and done it in 2 months, why did it take him 2 years? And the answer, according to Professor Rand, is he was looking at it. He'd paint 6 inches or a foot or 12 or a foot and a half, and then he would climb down the scaffolding and look at it for a day or two and self-reflect on what his progress was in that enterprise. And that's why it took him so long. It's not because he was lazy, Michelangelo. It's not because he was paid by the hour. It's because he was self-reflecting all the way through it. And that's a lesson that stuck with me through business and life, that lesson my painting professor gave me.
Yeah, it's that discipline of sometimes a little patience really pays off over the long haul. But we're in such a real time, give it to me now, give me all of it, attention deficit, all this reams of media hitting us. It's kind of refreshing to think back to such a great work of art, really involving that kind of patient discipline.
Yeah, it is. It's
Yeah.
inspirational.
Yeah. And so we hear all the time, Brooke, about data-driven marketing cultures and the benefits, the value of that. But what does that really mean from your experience? And then how do we successfully build a culture that is going to be able to harness data in a way to make better decisions?
Well, it starts from the top, and it starts with clear and consistent communication, which I could always do better at. Sometimes I'm not great at, and sometimes I'm okay at. But it starts in telling everyone that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the data. And it's challenging because, when I started doing this job, account managers at agencies would write Google copy for clients. They would go in and they'd write the headlines and the ad copy. Not always, but largely clients do that on their own now. Largely, especially as you become a bigger company and you deal with global companies like we do, and we work with startups too, and mom and pop shops. But if you work with a global multinational, they're going to have a copywriter, and that copywriter is probably going to understand the brand voice better than any external person would. Even if I've worked for someone for 17 years, there's going to be an internal person, and we do have clients for 17 years. There's going to be an internal person who is in charge of the brand voice, and that's their whole job. It's not to drive success across an institution or look at all the data. It's to know the brand voice. So sometimes the ads that those people write internally won't perform. Sometimes they'll be very branded, and even if they're beautifully written and the copy is fantastic and more clever than I would come up with in a given situation, it might not perform. And having a conversation with the client and saying, I love all of your copy. Here is the click-through rate, the rate at which a person interacts with it. It's measurable. It's at 1. And our portfolio as a whole, including you, is at 1.2. I'm not saying it's bad. We might be excluding people intentionally through this beautiful copy you're writing. But the data shows that there's a finite number of people looking for your mousetrap, your widget, your product. And we have to get as many of them as we can onto your website. And I'd like to partner with you using the data to see what works best in the ad copy and see if we can iterate on different versions of it. That's a tricky conversation because you're telling a client that you don't like their ad copy is what they're going to hear. Mm-hmm. So that's even if what you're saying is I love your copy. I just want to have a conversation about the data. That's how that's going to work. And if you're looking at a TV campaign, a lot of times clients' opinions, and they get to decide because they're paying, but a client's opinions are going to overrule what the data shows. And what we should be looking at if we're doing a CTV, a connected TV campaign, is how many people watch the whole video without clicking through? How does it correlate to brand searches increasing and visiting to your website? There's all sorts of data points we can look at that judge the creative should come first. The creative idea should come first. Mm-hmm. But there's all sorts of data that we can leverage behind the scenes to say, well, let's actually measure this ahead of time. And I think, Dan, a lot of it comes down to before you launch a campaign or an ad or ad copy is really thinking about what you want out of it. Is its job to get you more clicks? Is its job to get you more views? Is its job to sell more widgets? And really holding yourself accountable to the output of the data that comes out of it, which is, again, a tricky conversation when you're talking to a client who may have fantastic viewpoints and knowledge you don't have about their own brand.
Yeah, that whole aspect of the process where you have really clear and measurable objectives before you go in and execute, that is so important, but yet that can be like easier said than done, correct? I mean, sometimes that can be a little elusive to get that razor sharp clarity on the front end.
Yes, it can. One of the things we're doing as an agency that a client can't do is, in a privacy first, secure way, we're building an AI tool that compares a client's success metrics or their click-through rate or their engagement metrics to all the 60-ish clients in our portfolio and saying, congratulations, you're above the portfolio mean, or you're a little bit below. Let's talk about it. So we have to, while we're leveraging that data, make sure that we're using AI to look at data sets that are much more vast than any client could see, any person could any one person could see on their own, and then leverage that against a benchmark of a larger data pool to have a frank conversation about, like, to self-reflect, go back to it. How is this ad performing? And to leverage that power that way.
Mm-hmm. And of course, right now, there's no one that isn't talking about AI, or more importantly, that is actually trying to leverage AI and learn and do things a bit differently to really be more efficient and to really just, we're in this living laboratory, and it seems like things are changing every day. It's just a unique time in history. What do you think are some of the biggest real challenges that marketing leaders are facing today with this fast pace of AI innovation?
Cutting through the noise and seeing the true signal. And then also, I think there's a cultural thing going on where, I'll be honest, I was sitting at a client's office, a few weeks ago in California, and I was using their office it was Colorado. I was using their office for some calls. And what I saw in that office was junior employees that were getting emails. It could have been from their boss. It could have been from me.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been from Salesforce. I don't know. And they were taking those emails, putting them into chat, getting a response, and pushing it back out. That, I think, is the wrong way to use AI, right? To like just automate your own decision-making process, I think, is probably not the way we should be going. So that's a challenge. But from my point of view as an agency leader, it's helping clients cut through the noise that they're getting from 19 places. Another example of that is, your listeners may know that Facebook, Meta, bought a company called Manus, and they've integrated that into Facebook's Ad Manager. It's a really good tool. It'll give you a lot of really good insights into what your Meta campaigns are doing. However, the answer from Manus is always going to be do more Facebook, right? Like, it's got an inherent bias, and it's smart about how it does it. It's very good, but its intended use is to make it easier for you to spend more money in Meta. While there's a value to using Manus to look at your campaigns and assist what you're doing, you have to cut through the noise and realize that maybe that robot has a point of view that's not aligned with your goals. Maybe that AI's point of view or programming is to enrich itself and not you. And how do you cut through that signal? How do you cut through that noise to get a real signal? Which, by the way, again, not anti-Manus. Manus is great. We use it all the time, but you just have to be aware of what the signal is giving you is.
You know, we've seen a lot of announcements from these big technology companies of decisions or requirements to invest heavily into AI. And then that seems to be coupled with announcements of restructuring and layoffs. Yeah. And so this whole fear base, around, oh my gosh, AI is coming to take my job. What's your view of that?
Well, I think it is. I think that, I don't know what the future is going to bring, but I think that there's a 50% chance, as we record this today in April, I think that there's a 50% chance that 30% of white collar jobs are gone within 2 years. And I think that my company will have to find a way to leverage the AI tools that we're building to do more with less, which, by the way, is the same story that people were predicting with email and then the internet. This feels to me a little different. I worry about my son, who's about to go to college for the first year, and the jobs that will exist when he comes out, because not everyone knows how to leverage these tools properly. To go back to the example of my client taking their emails, putting it in chat, pasting it back, there's not a lot of use there, but there's a lot of use and utility in knowing the right questions to ask to get the data. And the worry I have is training junior people for future generations, right? The reason I'm good at my job is because I was eye-crunchingly deep in spreadsheets for 10 years, and I got to understand how to use the data and leverage it. I don't know if I would hire young Brook, young me, to go do that data right now, right? I might just use an AI software for it. No. So that's the worry that I have. And I don't know I know people have had those worries for a long time about different technologies, and you could probably go back to the steam engine and probably the wheel and probably the fire if we wanted to go back far enough. But this feels like a big sea change to me.
Yeah. And you started getting into this whole area of skill sets and how's that going to change? And do you see some very specific new skills that you think will be absolutely key to competitive advantage going forward?
So I do. And I may have a selection bias here. I think, for years I would have friends that I studied liberal arts with a painting focus. I believe in a well-rounded education. My wife is a high school principal here in Brooklyn. She thinks the same thing, although different kids deserve different children, and different people should be in their own paths in different ways. But for years, I'd have conversations with clients that would say, or friends and clients and colleagues that would say, I don't know why you value a liberal arts degree. Coding is where the money's at. Reading Herman Melville in a small room with other people is useless. You can read it on your own. Just learn coding. And I'd say, I don't know about that. Like, I understand the degree, 10 years ago, I understand that the degree outcomes are better for someone studying computer science, but I think understanding how to think logically is more important. And, coding is a lot different than it was a year ago or 10 years ago. And my job's a lot different. A lot of my job's being automated. So that's the first thing, is me just thinking that for a long time that a well-rounded degree, and that, by the way, you could have a really well-rounded degree in education if you study coding, right? If you learn to think logically about how pieces fit together, or if you study painting like I did as a major, you can still, I'm not saying everyone should just study the classics, but I think thinking in a well-rounded way is a superpower. And another example of that is my creative director and I, Mike, we gave a lecture. It was mostly Mike lecturing at at Eastern Connecticut State University a couple of weeks ago. And he was talking about how humanity is your superpower and a liberal arts degree is your superpower, because being able to think critically about how to solve a problem is what'll get you forward. And I happen to totally agree with him. Students were coming up after the lecture, and saying to our creative director, Mike, okay, I get that you made those ads for Amman Hotels, but what software did you use? And he'd answer, and I'd say, you guys are missing the point. It doesn't matter if the answer is Nano Banana or not, or Figma's native integration. The answer is whatever Mike is using now is not what Mike was using 6 months ago, and won't be what he's using 6 months from now. The answer is to think critically in a well-rounded way, and that is a real superpower in the current environment. And not everyone's wired that way. Not everyone's wired to sit down and think in a holistic way about that. Doesn't mean that people aren't super smart that don't do that, right? I'm not being critical of anyone, but it's a different wiring than like I don't know my times tables. I'm not wired to do math like that. So I have weaknesses, but I think that the critical emerging marketing skill to have facing AI and automation is the ability to think in a well-rounded, critical way about the problems you're facing. Because the ability to parse data is not a super skill right now. I think you'd agree with me, Jen.
Yeah. I mean, and so there are these aspects of repeatable, more transactional kind of functions. And, these tools come and they go, right? And they're going to evolve and they change. But there seems to be this timeless, pervasive value in, what many people might call more soft skills, but they're about human relationships and the ability to think critically, think honestly, and then apply that into, again, the things we were talking about before, to do the right level of self reflection, to be open to continuous learning, to be open to the idea that, we're going to go out and try stuff and it's not always going to work. And so the idea of falling and failing, but then failing forward so that we're going to build better. But having the right kind of mindset is huge going forward.
Yeah, my mindset is just doggedness. I think about it as an entrepreneur so many times that I don't want to toot my own horn because I have a lot of problems and failures, but left foot, right foot, just carrying on with things. Like I remember, and I've told this story in other places, but like on the way to vacation with my wife and her Mini Cooper one year, we got a text message from my biggest client. It was 40% of my revenue. They said, "Oh, we're firing you next week." And it would have been really easy to give up. And instead I just doggedly moved on. But, I have to self-reflect now about my company, and we measure our churn ratio, the rate at which clients retain us and fire us. And I know what those numbers are. And everyone at my company is using AI, hopefully in a very forward-thinking way, from the creative director to the graphic designer to the ad copy people. But they're all, and I'm not being critical of anyone, they're so deep in the meta team might be using Manus. The creative team might be using Figma, right? They're all using these deep things. And one of the things I'm building now with the help of some other people is an AI for my company, Mason, that ties them all together to give people a singular view. Because I have a judgment, and I might be wrong, but I have a judgment that our client churn lately is almost due entirely to the fact that people are so siloed at the company and don't see the whole picture. So the solution to that is not to bash the people that are doing the work because they're trying hard. And by the way, we're doing, knock on wood, it could all fall apart tomorrow. We're doing okay. I'm just observing what's going on. And so we're building an AI that ties these things together so that every account manager at the company has full visibility into a client's whole picture. So instead of just saying, I'm in charge of their email and their email is doing great, which might be the case, right? But I want the email marketer to know what the affiliate manager is doing. I don't want the affiliate manager to think things are going swimmingly if their channel's crushing it when the creative channel isn't. So I want to have everyone tied together with the same data set and the same, to go back to data, the same data set and the same strategic overview. And AI can help with that, right? We can build systems that tie things together in a way now that we couldn't do without hundreds of thousands of dollars of developer work, today.
Yeah, the word I was writing down as you were talking is cohesion. You're creating greater cohesion through that transparency across teams and speak in the same language.
That's right.
Yeah.
You said it better than I did. Thank you.
So,
steal that.
What separates exceptional leadership from just good enough?
I had a boss once that I really loved, a guy named Eric Bloomfield. Hi, Eric, if you're listening. And I still talk to Eric. And Eric always made me feel heard. He didn't always agree with me, and he was the boss, and his decision carried more weight than mine. But I always had an opportunity to talk to Eric and say, here's the way I think we should do this project. And I really liked working for him. That to me was a big piece of it, was just knowing that my opinion was valued. And that might be unique to my personality or not, I don't know. But knowing that I didn't get to win, he got to win, but he was open to talking about it. And that mattered a lot to me. And the other thing that I think for myself a lot is I can do a lot better about being more positive all the time as opposed to not telling it like I see it with people. But something I think I'm good at is repeating the important points ad nauseum, because it's a fast-paced world. People have got a lot of things to do other than listen to me. And so I need to be on message and on point about the things we're trying to achieve and how we're going to achieve them. I need to be super clear about communicating. So it's clarity for me, and then there's a human element of letting people know that their opinions are valued, even if you don't always take them, but they're always allowed to voice them, and you're allowed to speak freely about challenges that you see.
Yeah, I really like that. And, in my experience, Brooke, something that I've seen, sometimes a misinterpretation where leaders think, well, there's some disgruntled employees, unmotivated employees, because they're mad because they wanted something to happen and maybe a decision didn't go their way. When in fact, it's not so much that the decision was made. It may be that just the process was not inclusive to at least even feel engaged from the employee's perspective. And so sometimes I think there's a misread in that, and that prevents being more inclusive.
I'm going to say that also goes two ways. Like, I sort of feel like the basic social compact I have with my colleagues is, and I'm not always good at this, is my job is to create a work environment that they feel comfortable coming into, to give them open and sincere feedback about the performance, and 3, to pay them on time. Like, that's sort of my job. And their jobs are to be part of creating that same work environment, one, where the environment's good, good work is conducive to good work. 2, they're supposed to give open and honest feedback up and down the line, right? Like, we have a matching 401k program because enough people asked for it. I wasn't going to do that unless they asked me for it. I didn't even know about it. So that's good, sincere feedback. Like, hey, I really like this job, but here's what the competition has. Cool, tell me about it. Let's talk about it. We implemented that. And then they're also supposed to do the work that I assign to them, right? That's the basic construct. We're supposed to be part of making the workforce acceptable and conducive to good work. We're supposed to be open and honest with one another, up and down. Doesn't mean I have to listen to everything they say or they have to listen to everything I say. And then the third point is that in exchange for the salary, they have to bring their A game to work every day. And that doesn't always work, whether because of communication styles from me or from colleagues or for expectations or generational things. But that's sort of the way I see that.
Mm-hmm. And what's the best piece of business advice you have ever received?
Yeah. I have a client who I really like, who after 10 years fired us. And his advice to me was that he didn't feel like anyone at the company that he was dealing with understood this is very narrow to my advertising agency. It was good advice. I don't feel like anyone at the company is in charge of my success, Brook. And I said, well, hold on a second. This guy over here, he knows every single thing about your accounts and your budgets and your pacing and what converts into success for you better than anyone on your internal team. And this woman over here knows what creative's working on Meta better than anyone at your team. And this reporting person over here is tying it together. As a hive mind, they know your business. And he said, no. I don't want a hive mind. I want to know one person I can talk to. And I think he was not right, but his feedback was super instrumental, because if he felt that way, that meant it was true for him, and he gets to decide who he hires, right? And so like hearing that from him, and this is a recent thing, and you asked me the best business advice because it's fresh in my mind, the relationship was a 10-year relationship that ended like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. But his clear and consistent communication to me about that fact, even if I thought he was wrong, was super valuable for me to hear and digest and act on as best I could.
And when you think about the future, what's making you optimistic?
If you want to build something, you can build it. If you want to build a better workout app, you can build it. If you want to build I don't know what's going to happen in the capital markets, but if you want to build something that's an app or a product or a company, it's easier to do than ever before, and everyone has access to the same tools. I realized that a MacBook Pro is different than a Chromebook, and I realized with its processing power, and I realized that being able to afford a better Claude subscription is better than getting a free chat subscription. I understand those things, but the difference in the bar to climb over is so much more similar for everyone than it was 2 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And we're talking about AI. I think that is reason to be optimistic, because I do think that better ideas can get out there more easily now than they could 10 years ago.
Yeah, you're really describing the ultimate leveling of the playing field.
It's about how hard you work. Yeah, I mean, I always find that the harder I work, the luckier I get. And so, but we all have the same tools, and so we can all work as hard as one another now. Yeah, it is leveled, yes.
Do you have any other final advice for leaders that are looking to create more positive impact in this AI world and elevate the performance of their teams?
I'm in the thick of it like everyone else is, and I'd be disingenuous if I said that I'd figured everything out. But I try to lead from the front. My job as a CEO is to be thinking about next year and next quarter, not about today, although I can think about today. And I think that thinking with a clear-headed vision about where you want to go in the next year and being honest about what parts of jobs can be automated from AI, which doesn't mean reducing staff. It means being clear-eyed about what can be repeated and taken care of by computers, and really being open about that and not pretending it's not happening is a very key thing right now.
Well, Brook, thanks again for joining and sharing your very interesting journey in everything from harnessing data for better decisions, the importance of the human factor, even in an AI world going forward, and the new skills that we're going to need to be successful. Really inspirational. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Dan.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.